So Jeff, talking about the educational institutions, particularly schools, earlier they had been using online learning and digital platforms as a means of marketing. You know, it used to be a big brand thing for them that we are digitally equipped to impart education. But now what I see that even the smallest of schools have to shift to online teaching. So from being a revenue earning aspect, it has turned into a core part of their strategy. So what is this new migration that has taken place in terms of school owners and institutions?
Well, great question, and it's more core than people think. So I'm going to go back to an image from the very first session we did.
Yeah.
It is looking at the sort of history here, and just as a recap for people, on the right-hand side, we have sort of the history of education, and basically that not much change has happened in terms of pedagogy over the last 100, 120 years. However, we have had a lot of technology change. Now, what I want people to take a look at here is so this is 450 BC, this is way back, but I'm gonna cut it off there and go to about here. So we're gonna look at two different time periods. So this is about 1500 years, and then this is about 100 years. And so what I wanna show here now in a different image is sort of the history of pandemics. And so you can see the blue here was that first, the top part of my education timeline, and the red bottom. Now, this is major pandemics. This is not even dealing with like HIV and AIDS and some of these other sort of diseases that we've had to deal with. But this is sort of the virus type pandemic. So you see in 1300 years of that same timeline, we had about 3. But in the last 100 years, we've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we've had 2 in the last 10 years. You know what I mean? So the time between these, so this is the new normal. Everybody who keeps thinking, oh, no, as soon as we get a vaccine, we'll get back to normal, how it was before. Well, no, because there will be some other thing in the next 5 to 10 years, or how quickly we're developing, maybe even shorter, who knows? So having to come up with different methods of methodologies, not only of delivery, but we have to start to rethink sort of the pedagogy. Now, I'm working on some other YouTube stuff to deal specifically with this that'll be ready for the end of May. But where we're at now, I think we need to look at what are some changes then that this is going to bring. Well, let's talk about staffing. In the last section, we talked about how we could take really experienced teachers who aren't great with tech and really young TAs or student teachers who are great with tech but are new to teaching, and putting them together to try and do online stuff. We talked about teachers collaborating to try and work together to, if you've got a number of, say, 10 math 5 groups, why can't all those teachers get together, divvy up the workload, figure out the online content, and then you have everything sort of done, right? Last section, that was 2 sessions ago. Last session, we talked about the role that administrators can play in helping to support what teachers are doing in the digital classroom. But this also means that maybe some different kinds of lessons need to be done. So you might need to get freelance teachers coming in to do stuff. It's happening right now in the digital world. It's happened in a number of other industries. I, just a couple of years ago, worked for a large technology ed tech company in China, and we had 50,000 part-time US and Canadian teachers who were doing online stuff. So, and they were all part-time freelance. So it's not just about, you know, COVID hasn't just shown us where we had problems in our healthcare systems, but where we have problems in our economic systems and where we have problems in our education systems. So if this is the new normal, all of those have to change. And so who has to lead this? Well, it'd be better if teachers and schools, the people who are hands-on with students and know
Yeah.
what they're talking about, lead this change, as opposed to, no offense, leave it up to politicians who
Yeah.
don't know anything about education as such,
Yeah.
right? So we might need to look at our HR policies and a number of other stuff. Now, another thing I really want people to think about on a bigger picture stuff, and I'm going to bring up one last little image here, and this is the idea of content curation. And so what I mean by that is every university, virtually every university, has a philosophy 101 class. And they all cover basically the same sort of content. So
Yeah.
instead, again, of these individual teachers doing their stuff, what if, from an institution point of view, I could create, here are 10 Lego block lessons about Plato, and here's 10 Lego block lessons about Aristotle, and about Weber, and about Freud, and about Nietzsche, and about, you know what I mean? And so then as a teacher, I can go in and pick any two of all of those and put it together, and out it goes for my class.
Yeah.
And so then, so that's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it is, why couldn't I as a student take I know that this school in India is really good talking about this philosopher, and an Australian school is really good talking about that philosopher. And there's some small school in a some great professor in a small school in a small state in the US who's amazing about Marx. And you know what I mean? And so why can't I as a student go and cherry pick that stuff to still come out with the same result as the university allowing the instructor to go and cherry pick that stuff? And again, it's because we keep thinking this top-down mindset of how standards are supposed to be done based on a 120-year-old model. So from that, then, how can we start moving towards this idea of, instead of doing an hour lesson, maybe I can start putting together little Lego block pieces of, again, let's go back to Math 5, of my decimals. And I can do a whole bunch of this, and maybe some for higher learners, some for ones who are really struggling with decimals, some for the average group, and allow then teachers or students or even parents for help at home with homework to be able to go in and pull some of this stuff down. So this is the new reality. We need, and the next piece of this, though, to make all of this work, is for technology and education to start working closer together. What do I mean by that? Well, there's these big ed tech companies, yes, but they're mostly founded by technology people, and the education comes second. What really has to happen here is the pedagogy has to lead the way and the technology support it. That's not what's currently happening. Quick story. Quick story. A number of years ago in Philippines, I worked for a startup, technology startup, and we were doing we were providing support for call centers. And what we were doing is we worked with a number of different groups. Anyway, one project I work on was we were trying to create an online call simulation to use as an exam. Never been done before. So, of course, I'm all in. Let's try this. We reverse engineered a call simulation. We had 4 different scenarios. We reverse engineer it. I figure out all the different components that need it. We had to then take those components and match it to this standards body, their template or their matrix of outcomes that we needed to match, so that when it was marked, we could see whether or not the student would pass. Now initially we did it in Articulate because we could do branching questions and everything else. But in the Philippines, Articulate wouldn't work because it was SCORM files, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I had the chance to work with some amazing young developers, engineers, and coders who basically designed the system on what requirements I needed from an education perspective, and they designed the
Okay.
system, and it was killer. And this is how it needs to work. Not, I'm a
Yeah.
technology person and I see a small need in education, I'm going to jump in and say, this is what it has to be.
Okay.
Or educator who says, oh, give me this without understanding any of the technology. We need people to start, basically, we need technology companies, or we need the technology wings of universities to sit down with the
Yeah.
education wings of universities and start working much closer together. So bottom
Yeah.
line here, I'm hoping that we have got people really curious about making sure it's pedagogy first and
Yeah.
technology second as we move forward to become curious on how we're going to innovate.
Yeah, that's very important because as I was telling you about schools in India, I'm talking about schools in Sydney now. So what they've come up with now is that the child has to go to school only once in a week because they can't
Hmm,
afford to accommodate so many children. And maybe in India, we are expecting schools to open in the month of September. We're going to have a blend of offline and online classes. So this thing, when you've got to have an open staff, you as a school owner, you cannot just stick on to your staff. Your HR policies need to be more elaborate and
right.
more adjusting to the needs right now because of this pandemic. And obviously, as you said, that this is the new normal. You don't know when the next one strikes, even after the vaccine has been created.
Well, even as you mentioned there,
Yeah,
how are you going to do social distancing in a classroom of 40 or 50 students that it was really only
yeah,
designed for 30 or 40 students to begin with? How do you
yeah,
do that? Well, you can't under the current structure. But if you were to split the class, some
yeah,
comes early morning to middle afternoon and some comes the
yeah,
evening, and then again you're going, oh, but the HR. But again, if it's a flipped classroom where it's blended learning, some of it is online as the group and then a
mm,
teacher, some of it is online as the group and then the teacher. So again, people need to put aside all of their preconceptions of the last 120 years of what education, or actually thousands of years of what education is supposed to be,
yeah,
and think not just outside the box, think from scratch. Take the white blank, and if you could design a school from scratch
yeah.
for this situation, what would it look like? And then how can you start moving your school in that direction?
True, true. I just had one, I was curious about one thing because I've been an entrepreneurship teacher, and entrepreneurship is a subject that talks about more hands on experience and it leads to many vocational subjects also. So, would this kind of a framework be possible for vocational training?
Well, so again, you're going to now talk about sort of the apprenticeship sort of groups and all kinds of other stuff. Well, again, let's look back on it. I didn't spend much time on it on my timeline there, but for hundreds of years, we had the old-fashioned guild and apprenticeship sort of stuff, where if you were going to be a boat builder or a carpenter or a smith, you would do that for years and years and years and years, and eventually move your way up and become sort
Yeah,
of the master and take on a number of apprentices. And now we've been able to streamline the process now, but I don't see why not. And it depends on what we're talking about and safety of students, safety of people. There's a big difference between a doctor, you know, doctors can learn surgery with VR now as opposed to trying to
yeah,
mess around with dead bodies. Um, in terms of vocational stuff, there's probably a lot that can be done hands-on, maybe sooner rather than later or at the same time. However, there's another side of that I want to talk about, the entrepreneurs. And so I talked about devs and coders. Now, the ones I worked with were actually university grads, but I've also worked with some other ones who are amazing coders and amazing website developers who never stepped foot in a college. So under our current situation where we have such a large percentage of the population who are sort of freelance tech people.
Right.
There's been all kinds of stuff about this over the last number of years about why do you need to go to college and why do you need to go to university? And well, because a lot of companies still think you have to have that
Yeah.
stamp to be good.
Yeah.
But going back to your concept of an entrepreneurial mindset, how would an entrepreneur run a school?
Yeah.
That's a whole other session. Yeah, you know what I mean? But and maybe we can end with that by getting people to think about how would an entrepreneur run a school? I don't mean somebody who's going to try and do it to scam people to get as much money as they can. I mean, how can somebody run a school to still get the outcomes, meet the outcomes, if not exceed them, but in a completely different process than what we're currently doing?
Yeah. That's the question of the hour. So, it's been very nice to see how we have, in all of a sudden, we've been forced to migrate in larger aspects, and we are trying to adjust. We are still adjusting, but this, I believe, is a golden opportunity for us to grow, for us to actually change. The change that we should have absorbed or thought about ways before. It's high time that we start thinking about more innovative, creative techniques that are more based on knowledge imparting rather than just showing off that yes, we are technically so advanced.
No, and that's a great point. And so the innovation thing is what I'll
Yeah.
sort of quickly finish with here is now you're going to get a chance to see who are the real innovators.
Yeah.
All people talk about being innovators, all people say they're innovators, but within education, now you're going to see who are the real innovators.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Jeff, thank you so much. It has been very insightful. All the segments that we've done together, it has been great. And we've picked up so many points. I'm sure the people who belong to my community, even those people who are aspiring to be teachers, I'm talking about them also, they have a lot of thinking to do. They have,
Yeah.
even if there are children who want to go into trainings, who want to become trainers, whether corporate trainers or trainers of any trade for that matter, they have a lot of things to pick up from this set of interview.